Chapter 63 Levitical Cities Numbers 35, 1-8. And the Lord spake unto Moses in the plains of Moab by Jordan near Jericho, saying, Command the children of Israel that they give unto the Levites of the inheritance of their possession cities to dwell in, and ye shall give also unto the Levites suburbs for the cities round about them. And the cities shall they have to dwell in, and the suburbs of them shall be for their cattle, and for their goods, and for all their beasts. And the suburbs of the cities which ye shall give unto the Levites shall reach from the wall of the city and outward 1,000 cubits round about. And ye shall measure from without the city on the east side 2,000 cubits, and on the south side 2,000 cubits, and on the west side 2,000 cubits, and on the north side 2,000 cubits, and the city shall be in the midst. This shall be to them the suburbs of the cities. And among the cities which ye shall give unto the Levites there shall be 6 cities for refuge, which ye shall appoint for the manslayer, that he may flee thither, and to them ye shall add 42 cities. So, all the cities which ye shall give to the Levites shall be 48 cities, them shall ye give with their suburbs. And the cities which ye shall give shall be of the possession of the children of Israel. From them that have many ye shall give many, but from them that have few ye shall give few. Every one shall give of his cities unto the Levites, according to his inheritance which he inheriteth. Numbers 35, 1-8. In the division of the land, the Levites were to receive no central area, no assigned territory, as were the other tribes. Instead, they were to be given 48 cities, of which 6 were to be cities of refuge. 3 of these were to be east of the Jordan, and 3 on the west. The suburbs referred to the surrounding pasture or orchard areas, and each was to be over 200 acres in size. Some say 413 acres. The sanctuary was to be centrally located, and there could be only one sanctuary. Weekly worship took place at home and later in the synagogues. However, the Levitical cities were to be strategically located among the 12 clan areas in terms of population centres. They were different from the many existing cities in that they belonged to the Levites and were Levitical centres. The Levites had a part in temple care and ceremonies, but it was subordinate to that of the priests. In the blessing of Levi by Moses before his death, he cited the fact that this clan had on various occasions, at Sinai, Massah and Meribah, placed loyalty to God above all other loyalties. Deuteronomy 33, 8 and 9. Their task is described in these words by Moses. They shall teach Jacob thy judgments, and Israel thy law. They shall put incense before thee, and hold burnt sacrifice upon thine altar. Deuteronomy 33:10. The second half of this sentence cites Levi's liturgical functions. Only a small minority of the Levites were ever needed at the tabernacle or temple, so that this function affected a limited number on a rotational basis. The basic Levitical function was to teach God's judgments and God's law. This meant 2 things. First, Levites were used as judges because they were experts in the law. Second, they were to teach the law. They were the national educators. Imagine the implications of this if applied to the present. It would mean a network across the United States of Christian schools, colleges and universities, all concerned with establishing a Christian culture and upholding God's law. If this seems a visionary idea, we must remember that it once was done to a degree in the United States. Up to about 1900, about 75% of all US colleges and universities were founded by Scottish Calvinists who were immigrants here. When I was a student and first learned of this fact, I mentioned it with some awe to an elderly retired Scottish pastor, a Presbyterian, and he referred to it as a Levitical task. The more trusting ways of his times and the lack of a Van Tillian presuppositionalism made it possible in time to subvert all these schools, but it was still a remarkable and biblical accomplishment. The Levites were able to go out from these cities to teach in every community. They could also establish in these cities centres of scholarship. A reading of the Old Testament seems to indicate that possibly the Levites were more faithful than the priests. After the Babylonian captivity, Levitical cities apparently were never rebuilt, according to rabbinic tradition. Levitical city properties could not be alienated. At any time, a Levite could redeem a house he had sold if he had the funds. At the Jubilee, it reverted to him if he had failed to redeem it. The open land could not be sold at all. Leviticus 25, 29, and 34. In the division of the land, the Levites received 4 towns in each tribe, except Judah and Simeon, where they received a total of 9, and Naphtali, which had only 3 Levitical cities, Joshua 21. There was, apparently, a lack of full faithfulness to this allotment, because the book of Judges indicates the unsettled and apostate nature of some Levites, Judges 17, 7-13. In fact, it would appear from Judges 17, 7-13 that some Levites became chaplains to wealthy men, also that their faith was syncretistic, if not pagan. Judges 18, 1-31. In 1 Chronicles 6, 54-81, we see that the record gives a different story than does Joshua. While there are a similar number of cities, they are not the same, 1 less in each of Judah and Benjamin, and 2 less in each of Dan and Zebulun. In other words, some plans and promises were discarded. In the Reformation of Jehoshaphat, the Levites, princes and priests were used to teach in the cities of Judah to bring about a return to God's law, 2 Chronicles 17, 7-9. Hezekiah's Reformation also relied on the Levites, among others, 2 Chronicles 29, 3-19. However, at the end of the Babylonian captivity, proportionally fewer Levites returned to Judea, Nehemiah 7, 39-45. Only 74, as against 4,289 priests. In the New Testament, the priests are often mentioned, and the Levites rarely. Ezekiel 44, 10-13 indicates that, before the fall of Jerusalem to the Babylonians, the Levites had become especially apostate and deeply involved in idolatry. It is possible that the rise of the synagogue was a replacement of the Levites and their work. As we have seen in Numbers 18, 24-32, the tithe was given to the Levites, who then tithed the tenth of this tithe to the priests. This meant that instruction, when this law was obeyed, took priority in the faith and life of the people. In our day, such an emphasis on education and scholarship on the part of the Christian community would revolutionize and recapitalize society. This law is also one reason why theonomy is unpopular in an age when the institutional church claims the total tithe and denies the right of anyone else to a penny of it. Over the centuries, this Levitical aspect of God's ministry has been the object of suspicion and control. When the medieval university developed, its scholars were either monks, priests, or friars, that is, under the jurisdiction of a church-controlled order. Protestantism has been no less eager to control its teachers. This has been an impediment to Christian scholarship. If Christian scholars cannot be trusted, are we to assume that only priests and pastors can be? Is it not wiser to recognize the propensity of all to sin and to trust God's requirements above man's controls? Men too often have more confidence in themselves than in God. They find it a pity that God will not take their advice. This dispersal of the Levites meant that they were to have no corporate existence as a tribe, but were rather fragmented in this way in a God-appointed isolation. This was to place the stress on their teaching function rather than their corporate status. Our academic lemmings, however, insist on tenure and on a host of controlling academic associations. The result has been a politically correct rigidity and an isolation from reality. At the same time, the Levites were put together in strategically located cities which were like fortresses of learning. In fact, for no valid reason, a few scholars have tried to see the 48 cities as military centres given their locations. They were rather to be centres of intellectual defence. As Calvin wrote, "It was in God's wonderful providence that they, the Levites, were rather placed in peculiar and fixed residences than allowed to mingle themselves promiscuously with the rest of the peoples, for the cities which God assigned to them were so many schools where they might better and more freely engage themselves in teaching the law and prepare themselves for performing the office of teaching, for if they had lived indiscriminately among the multitude, they were liable to contract many vices, as well as to neglect the study of the law, and prepare themselves for performing the office of teaching. But when they were thus collected into separate classes, such an union reminded them that they were divided from the people that they might devote themselves altogether to God. Besides, their cities were like lamps shining into the very furthest corners of the land. They were therefore fortified, as it were, by walls, lest the corruptions of the people should penetrate to them. Their association together also should have stimulated them mutually to exhort each other to continency, decent and modest manners, temperance, and other virtues worthy of God's servants, whilst if they fell into dissolute habits, they were the less excusable. Thus, their cities were like watchtowers in which they might keep guard, so as to drive impiety away from the borders of the Holy Land. Hence was the light of heavenly doctrine diffused, hence was the seed of life scattered, hence were the examples to be sought of holiness and universal integrity. Calvin's words remind me of two professors at Berkeley, California, at the university for whom I graded test papers. One felt that the only civilized place for a university was New York City, where a man could be a part of the theatrical, social, and quote-unquote intellectual scheme. The other believed that it was not ivory tower thinking for colleges and universities to be isolated so that their focus could be scholarship, not a scene given to trends and fashions. Our text refers to 6 cities of refuge, which we shall next study.